That's right.
Live stream has started.
Thank you. We are waiting for Warren Law.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
He's still out of town, right? Yeah.
Should we wait for him or can we go ahead? But he's a committee member.
Yeah. Carrie, are you on this committee too?
No,
Oh, all right. So it's
But,
just,
just with everything that's going on.
yes.
Tina, did we get an update from Warren about attending today by any chance?
No, we did not.
Okay,
So we may just want to give him a few minutes.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we have enough. We think we have enough of a quorum, right? Correct,
Yes.
Lawrence? Yeah.
Yeah, we have got Farid and myself and probably one of the two directors can.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Just checking to see if I have Warren's contacts.
I wonder if he's tried to get into the previously scheduled meeting,
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, there's another link.
as he did last time. Yeah.
Yeah, through Janelle. I think that was the. Oh, yeah, you're right. Good
Oh,
view.
Yeah.
right,
Mhm.
right.
Yeah.
Send him the
Because even though I deleted it, I had 2 notices pop up for this meeting.
It's weird.
Hmm.
I'm going to send this to him right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tom, maybe I could take a moment to just introduce Fatima as we did at the
Yes.
CGHRC meeting. I know most folks were at that meeting the other day, but just
Mhm.
quickly there's a new face on the screen here today from our team. So Fatima Mahmood has joined Toronto Seniors Housing and will be supporting myself and Brad as our executive assistant. And she'll also be supporting some of the aspects of the committee and some of the other committees as well. So I just wanted to welcome Fatima to our meeting today to help with the support. And
Great.
Liz did.
Welcome. We couldn't see you last time, so
Oh, that's
good
right.
to be able to see you. Yeah.
And Liz, who is just dropped off the call, just want to acknowledge, and Liz has been supporting us on these committees as well, and has been doing a bit of a transition with Fatima. And so Liz has dropped off now, but just want to acknowledge her support and thank her for the work as well. Liz is still with us, but Liz won't be supporting the committees the same way going forward.
And Warren's here.
Palm
Oh,
trees and all I saw in the background.
yeah, well, it's better sometimes not to be on the video. Oops,
Oh,
one?
we just got over a storm here, Warren. so-
Yes, yes.
Yes, I saw it. Feel very badly for everyone.
I'm sure you do, Warren.
Okay, now that we have the quorum, shall we start the meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to this virtual meeting of the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee of the Toronto Seniors Housing Corporation, which is being live streamed. In addition to the participating board members and the leadership team, I'm pleased to welcome our virtual audience and thank you for joining us. I want to thank Grant, Vince, and their team for the preparation of the materials brought forward for today's meeting. Today, we will be reviewing this committee's work plan for the current year, consolidated budget for our corporation and TCHC that was submitted to the city, updates to two policies, that's accounts payable policy and delegation of authority policy. And finally, Vince will provide the preliminary financial results for 2022 and other financial updates. Let us start with the Land and African Ancestral Acknowledgement. As a committee of a City of Toronto Corporation, we honor the land we are on, which has been the site of human activity since time immemorial. It is the traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River First Nations. Ontario is covered by 46 treaties and other agreements and is home to many Indigenous nations from across Turtle Island, including the Inuit and the Métis. The committee also acknowledges that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. These treaties and other agreements, including the One Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, are agreements to peaceably share and care for the land and its resources. Other Indigenous nations, Europeans, and newcomers were invited into this covenant in the spirit of respect, peace, and friendship. We are mindful of broken covenants and we strive to make this right with the land and with each other. We are all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers, immigrants, and newcomers in these generations and generations past. We would also like to acknowledge those who came here forcibly, particularly as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. Therefore, we honor and pay tribute to the ancestors of African origin and descent. Item number 3, that's the approval of the public agenda. Are there any amendments to the public agenda? Having heard none, may I now have a motion for approval of the public agenda?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I need a seconder.
I'll second it if need be.
Okay, seconded by Brenda. So it's carried. So it will be item number 4. That's a declaration of conflict of interest, if any. Does any member have any conflict? Hearing none, let us move to the next item. That's the approval of the public session minutes of this committee's meeting that was held on November 17th, 2022. I need a mover and a seconder.
I've been through the minutes. I'm happy with them, Mr. Chair, so I'll move.
Moved by Warren. And I need a seconder.
I'll second.
Second by Carrie. And we'll move to the all in favor, so it's carried. Then item number 6, that's the approval of the closed session minutes of this committee's meeting that was held on November 17th. Again, I would need a mover and a seconder. Moved. Anyone?
So moved.
Moved by Warren.
Carrie, I'll second.
Carrie, seconded by Carrie. All in favor. So carried. Okay, let's move to the next item then. That's the item number 7. That's the action items for this committee. Vince? Or, sorry, it's yeah.
Yeah, so it's number.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, so there are 2 action items that have both been resolved in the past, so that information has been completed.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, it has been done. Thank you. So let's move to the next item then. That's item number 8. That is the proposed work plan for this committee for the current year. Grant?
Thank you, Warren. So through the chair, I'll share my screen briefly
Okay.
to bring up the draft of the work plan. Hopefully everybody can see that.
Yeah.
So to just add a bit of context, so for each of the committees going forward, starting this year, we have developed a high-level view of some of the proposed topics that we would bring forward to each meeting. So what you see in front of you as the draft work plan for AFRC shows the topics, the potential topics that would be included on each of the meetings throughout the year. So we're at today's meeting, but then we have, subsequent meetings. There are some topics that are repeated throughout and are on each of the meetings. And then there are certain topics that show up at different meeting times. So for example, the annual report would be on the next meeting along with some updates. The audit is another one. Later on in the year, you'll see, for example, the future year budget and the risk management framework. So this is intended to be a guide, and similarly, we've developed work plans for the other two committees, and it's something we'd use as a reference point going forward for this committee and working with the chair to plan out future agendas. So I'll just open it up for any questions.
I have a general question about budget timelines. I assume there's a city timeline for when the budget renewal every year comes up. What is it? Do we have to have things prepared in the fall for submission to city?
Through the chair.
I'm gonna ask Vince to address that. Thanks, Vince.
Yeah, through the chair. Typically, you're correct, Brenda. It's through the fall that we typically begin that process. The process actually will be starting around end of July, beginning of August, and essentially it goes all the way up until October, November is when we have a sort of like a preliminary draft information.
Yeah.
And the goal would be always is to have the board approved in the late November meeting. But I think over the last year now, I noticed that there's been a bit of challenges where we had to go through into December. But typically by the late November meeting, that board meeting, the budget should be completed by then. But I think this past year has been a bit more challenging just due to the fact that there's been one is the budget shortfall from the city, but also there's been the relationship as well between TCHC and TSHC. So that poses another issue. But typically by late November, the board budget should be approved by that time.
Because this year, city council approves it in February, right?
And in February, and that's the city council always will be approving around that same time. So the through the budget process as well. Once we submit it, once the approve is done through the board, in January is when the consultations and the meetings with all the councillors.
Yeah.
Then the approval gets done in actually in February. So that timeline is still correct at this point. Yes.
So in other words, we approve something halfway into the first quarter. I mean, I've never understood that a budget's approved while you're in that budget year, but I guess that seems to be the process here. So the city sets it up that it's a February city council meeting that approves the final budget.
Yeah, and correct. And then typically the council also would like to have the board approve the budget before the budget note's completed as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And through the chair, maybe I'll just mention, we did show here, Brenda, a proposal for potentially a special AFRC around the November 17th to 20th.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I saw that. I was just trying to understand the city processes because these have an impact on us.
Yes. Okay.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question to staff?
Yeah, go, Warren, go ahead.
Thank you. With reference to the Q4 meeting and a risk management framework, what will be the focus at that meeting in terms of the risk management framework?
So through the chair, Warren, so the intent is that we will bring on a third party to help us support in the development of a risk management framework for Toronto seniors. And this will be an opportunity to discuss that initiative in the fourth quarter meeting. So it's ultimately, we haven't yet formally set that in motion, So we'd have to look at more specific timelines as we get into the year, but it would be to come to that committee meeting to talk about that particular initiative.
Thank you.
So
Any
does,
other questions?
so does that framework detail what the possible risk areas are that need to be monitored or evaluated? Or is the framework just a general calendar thing? Like what's in the framework? It's a framework for how we deal with risks or how we identify them, or what is it?
So through the chair, I anticipate it would be an exercise in actually defining how we look at risks, how we assess risk, and then how we mitigate and monitor and address things.
Okay.
So it will be we will still have to scope specifically how we will do it. We'll look to use some frameworks. This development of a risk management framework, there are practices that we can leverage to help support this, and as well, but we want to look at it from our specific lens. And it's an area that we haven't yet really spent a whole lot of time on. And we're looking to bring in some resources this year to actually focus it. So the exact scope of what will be in the framework is to be determined, but it will be at some level what I described.
Okay, and Mr. Chair, can I just add to that? My two concerns I have. One is the effect of climate, environmental type things, if that could be included in that. And by that, I mean even something as, our weather patterns that are changing, and it might affect our buildings, might affect utilities, electric, etc. And the second thing of interest and concern for me is the risk associated. We have a lot of contracted relationships, a lot of our operational things, and the vendors, etc. I see that as an area of risk. As soon as you don't control something, then there's a greater increase of risk and non-compliance. So I'd like to identify that as an area I'd like to have considered.
Thank you, Brenda. I noted them down. It's basically we'll be developing a new comprehensive enterprise risk framework. We'll certainly look into that. Thank you for that.
Because, if electricity goes down, then there goes our elevators, and how do we get seniors up to the 3rd floor or 13th floor? You know what I mean? It's I experienced that once with my son, who's in a wheelchair, and we had the fire department lift him up 3 floors to get to his apartment. You don't really want to do that with 200 people.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Carrie? Yeah. Fareed?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just very quickly, just on the risk management framework, I think it needs to be enterprise-wide, and obviously I think it needs to be comprehensive. I think we can be careful, though, that we're not putting too much into this risk management framework because obviously this is fiscally driven, and there are some other risks outside of this that I think would have to be addressed, for example, by the governance committee and by the board as a whole. So while I think we can ask staff to accommodate as best as they can the various elements we've talked about, I'd be reticent to sort of let this go into areas that are not sort of the traditional risk management that I think this committee needs to be dealing with.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate that, Creed. I won't know until things are developed, but it just occurred to me those things might have financial implications. So that's what I'm thinking about is the cost as much as any social dislocation. So it's not an attempt to add on, but I think they are considerable risks in a financial way. And I'll wait and see what the committee comes up with. But we need to start acknowledging these risks and that's our corporate responsibility and our fiduciary responsibility as well as a board.
I think that will be shared with all board members, the scope, and certainly open for feedback and any additions.
Yeah.
Thank you. So if there are no more questions, any comments, then we'll move to the next item. That's item number 9. That's the consolidated budget for 2023 of our corporation plus TCHC.
Thank you. Through the chair, just wanted to let everyone know that there's a couple of changes in the document. Changes on page 62 and page 69. So if you look into your document, and I guess the correct document would be the one on our website. So there are a couple of changes. One is on the format and the other one's on the rounding. So just please note that there are a couple of minor changes on that. If you have a version, we will come through that. But anyway, before we start number 9, I just wanted to allude to that there. But thank you, Mr. Chair. There, we will begin with number 9 on the consolidated 2023 operating budget. As the board has approved, in this session here, we will present the actual budget amount, budget figure on the consolidated basis, and also the submission to the city that was done recently. So if I may, I will pop up section number 9 and just speak a little bit on the budget that was approved on a consolidated basis. Just 1 second here. So I've got them right here. Okay, so just listed here, as you've seen, is the consolidated for TCHC and TSHC. Total revenue came out expected to be 696,087 on expenses of 696,087. It is a balanced budget. As you noted in there as well, there will be a withdrawal from reserve of 13 million from TCHC as a result to be able to offset any shortfall for 2023 budget season. Along with that as well, there's about a $10.8 million of COVID expenditure budget for this year, which we're expecting the federal and provincial government to support and be able to contribute into this area here, as we've done in the previous 3 seasons. So that come out to, again, 10.7, 10.8 shortfall. Excluding COVID expenses, we had a balanced budget. And if you look at prior year's budget was expected to have, in this case here, a shortfall of $4 million. However, with the 17 million expected COVID expenditure, there was a $21 million shortfall for the 2022 forecast year. And along with that as well, you will see in the attachment number 2, the budget notes that was submitted as part of the city. And that included, in this case here, all the notes and all the financials relating to the consolidated organizations for the two, for both TCHC and TSHC. Is there any questions relating to the budget submission?
Vince, through the chair.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about, I know the executive committee, reviewed the budget, and the budget is going to council in mid-February. Were there any changes at committee?
Thank you. And through the chair, we had 2 meetings this past month. One was on the 12th and the other one was on the 24th of January. I believe there were no questions or no issues raised with the budget. And now we're waiting for the next date, which is, I believe, on the February 14th, which is expected to be passed through council. And so accordingly, there were no questions asked of TCHC and also TSHC. This budget.
Brenda?
Yeah, just a couple quickies. It mentioned in the budget the a net zero budget. What is a net zero budget? You mean meaning it's a budget that's in
It's a balanced budget as well.
a balanced budget. Okay, I've just never heard that
Yeah.
phrase before.
That's
Okay, and the a question about the mortgage interest and principal in the budget. It's a general question. Are our buildings built and funded through mortgage instruments?
Correct.
I mean, TCHC, of course, and not us per se.
Yeah, so currently right now, all of this is being done through the TCHC division, and they have essentially debentures and all the mortgages relating to
Okay.
their expenses. So in this case, we don't have a lot of visibility in there in that area, unfortunately. And so in this regard here, I would expect there will be some sort of increase as a result of the recent increases in the interest rate. But that has been set through the CMHCH housing group. And so from our perspective, I cannot really comment on that because we don't have any sort of say in that area.
So debentures are one of the means of financing. Okay.
Yeah.
And they have an operating subsidy versus a base subsidy. So the operating subsidy is the one that we get every year. But is the base subsidy a set amount, or is it a percentage, or what's the difference?
Through the chair, typically we get the funding through the city, and the funding is amount to about $272 million, and that essentially is to offset any sort of increases, including in this case here, all the interest increases, utilities. I don't have that breakdown more specifically in terms of that operation piece of it, because again, we don't house and we don't deal more there, so I cannot comment on in that area.
Brenda, have you completed your questions?
Have we gotten the COVID reimbursement, or is that expected to come, or?
We have not received the COVID yet, which we will discuss in our agenda number 10. But council through the city, we are looking to get that shortfall funded for 2022. But it is expected that we will get some sort of announcement coming through. It was also late in 2022 that we received the 21-21 subsidy. So it would expect to be the similar process for this current year, yes.
It might be delayed. And my last question was the capital budget represented here. That was mostly Toronto community housing in the capital. I don't think there was anything for us there.
No, nothing at all for TSHC in this regard here.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. That's it.
Carrie, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Lawrence. Vince, just on that, the topic of the 10.8 million shortfall, how confident are we that the other two levels of government are going to contribute? And on the off chance that they don't, or it isn't the full amount, what's our backup plan?
That is a very good question. I mean,
we
in the past they've been, with the city, they've been subsidizing, and the government have come in and actually sponsored and provided the relief and the funding. There is no means for TSHC and TCHC to raise capital or raise funding to offset any sort of shortfall. In the event, worst case scenario, that if both the provincial and the federal government doesn't come in and compensate for those shortfall, we will be at a position where the city will need to potentially go into deficit and be taking out mortgages or be taking out loans in this case here to pay for that shortfall. But it is quite a big amount. I know that the city has been putting motions forward with the city councils and also through the mayor. They have raised concerns in April of every year to get the funding commitment sooner rather than later. So I would expect it in 2023, probably in the coming months, we would expect similar agenda and similar motion that will be raised and be brought up forward to get the funding completed through the provincial and federal government much sooner. It is quite a challenging situation, if I put it this way, because the money has been outgo, but in terms of compensation, we don't know until the end. So certainly, there's always a risk to the organization, and the only thing that we could do here is essentially keep our fingers crossed that the both the provincial and the federal government will come into play. We've been sort of providing on a monthly basis and also quarterly basis reporting to the city as well. So definitely, it is a budget. So we will have to sort of update that if conditions do change and if there will be no funding involved in those areas. And we will have to make decisions at a later time. But for now, this is the budget that we could potentially be at a shortfall, both combined with TCHC and TSHC of $10.8 million, if those two level governments doesn't come in and support us on that basis there.
Okay.
Would you like to
Thank you.
comment?
Fareed, if you want to go ahead of me, I think you had your hand up.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Through the chair. I mean, I think Carrie's question is obviously very timely, and I was going to make a couple of comments on it because I think
Yeah.
obviously we have no control over this, and the city has to balance its budget. It's required by law to balance the budget. But I think this is a bigger problem than just TSHC. If this is $1 billion question, I mean, all city departments are putting in requests for COVID. So I think while we should be concerned and should be worried and hopefully keep our fingers crossed, I think if the feds and Ontario don't come up with the funding, it's going to be a citywide issue that I think the city will have to address corporately. So we're all in this boat. I mean, ours is probably one of the smallest, I would think. Sorry, Tom.
Yeah.
I know through the chair, Fareed, you hit the nail on the head in terms of what I was just going to raise is that this is the city treasurer in fact said that there's almost a third budget for the city as it relates to COVID, and so we are in this with the entire city. So it would be a city response, not simply TSHC. Thanks.
Yes.
Grant?
Through the chair, and there are some materials that the city published as part of their budget launch in the meeting that Vince noted earlier in January, where they talk about a $933 million shortfall for COVID-related expenses. They also articulate that they are assuming full funding support from the provincial and federal governments towards these COVID-19 impacts. However, if they don't get that funding, they are looking at one-time emergency provision of capital funds to address that. They also note it's not a sustainable strategy. If you'd like, we could share with this committee the presentation materials that the city had put up.
That'd be great.
The
be great.
COVID impacts broadly, as you can see, are extremely
Enormous. Yeah. Well, just the housing piece alone, the homeless piece alone is what, at least a third of that? I can't remember the numbers.
They do have a breakdown of the COVID at some degree. It's very high level.
Yeah.
Just for context, they are also looking for funding beyond COVID expenses from the other levels of government.
Yeah.
In addition, several $100 million more for other things too.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Vince, I have a question. Would it be possible to provide us our corporation's standalone budget numbers?
Good point.
Yeah.
Definitely, we do have that information, and I know that was raised and discussed with both the city and also TCHC. We can certainly do that as an in-camera session, as we have done in the previous session, and certainly we can provide that information. Unfortunately, we cannot provide that through a public.
Yeah, for the next board meeting, probably it can be provided. Next
yes,
month.
certainly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments on budgets? Brenda.
Just one last one. I know we've had a delay in hiring some of our senior management staff as part of this process. Are we proceeding with hiring our internal auditor role?
No.
No?
No, not for the time being.
But that was a request of our committee.
That's correct. And you and I agree with you. You and I have
right.
concerns, but let's see how things go. Now we are in an initial preliminary state. Most of the work is, I think, being shared with the TCHC. That corporation is carrying on most of the work. We'll certainly see. I mean, that's a priority, certainly.
Yeah. And are we revisiting that later on, or?
Tom, would like to say something?
Yes, through the chair. I just comment that we, in terms of what we presented to the committee, the board, is there's 10 positions that were
Yeah.
essentially we held off until
Right.
2024. So that we will continue to keep an update provided to the board on that.
Oh, so 2024 was actually stated as the time frame.
Just because the reason I say 2024 through the chair, the reason I say 2024 is because we deferred those 10, and so we didn't specifically defer till 2024, but that would be the budget year that we would want to get them in for. But it still is our intention, with the approval of the city budget on February 14th, that there are 10 corporate positions that we'd proceed to hire.
So is that responsibility of our own internal set of eyes and ears? Is that being replaced somewhere, or is it being held by someone or done by someone, or is it just not going to happen at all until 2024?
The internal audit?
Well, that's not only the internal audit, but a staff person responsible for that second set of eyes and making sure our practices are consistent and transparent. And I mean, who's gonna be minding the store in terms of that piece? Like, I understand we're holding off on the hiring of senior management, but it's a function that still needs doing. So who's doing it?
Vince?
Yeah, through the chair. So definitely in terms of the current operation in 2023, without the lease agreement in place, the transaction and the volume of transaction is much lower. I do
Okay.
hear that. Yes, you're correct that the set of eyes and the set of ears will be done through TCHC. They have their own internal group that does again, that's through the operation component, which is right now being done through TCHC. So they are responsible in that area there. But from a corporate perspective, and also in that area, certainly there is in areas of opportunity, and we are looking very closely and working with the delegations of authority, and also reviewing a second set of review just to make sure that informations are correct. Certainly, it is welcome that if there's needed in terms of further review and analysis, we can certainly do that as well through the city or through TCHC. But
not through our own resources.
No, and that would be difficult to go through our own resources just for the sake of that. But I mean, we can develop something of an internal process for review, but certainly that would take additional time and additional resources and requirements to do that. But in terms of set of expertise, I think we will need to go externally just to get that information to be able to, gather that for a third point of view as well.
Okay, so we're deferring to TCHC in effect.
Correct, yeah.
Alternative checks and balances, probably for the time being, for this year, we can manage it well and good.
Well, Lawrence, you're the finance guy. So.
I do understand, but then we have got financial constraint. You and
yes, no, I understand, but as long as you're happy, then
I'm not happy. But the more and more I read about the clean audit reports given by Big Four, and then every day something or other comes up, then you have. I'm really concerned about the internal controls. So long as the internal controls are stronger, right? There's a board. We have a fiduciary duty.
That's right. We do.
There's a fine line. We cannot interfere in the operations. So how do we manage? What kind of comfort we have? That's my concern. Oh, we'll see. We are aware of that. Thank you. Shall we move to item number 10? Let's see.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I had my hand up. I just want to don't leave this conversation without saying that, we have a second set of eyes, and that's the TCHC. So it's not like we don't have any kind of control. So I think we need to be clear on in that regard. And the only reason why we are deferring this, and this decision was made some time ago, is because of the situation that we find ourselves in. Ideally, I think we'd like to proceed with an internal auditor, but given the fact that that function is currently being fulfilled elsewhere, and we're going to have a chance to review some of the fiscal policies. One of them today is on the agenda, which is the whole delegation piece, that I think can put some control that we deem to be appropriate, while we're still trying to manage our budget and try to function perhaps without a full-time internal auditor.
I appreciate that, Fred. It's just that I read the staff newsletter, and we were congratulating in our staff newsletter. One of the staff noticed that the vendor was not properly doing their job, and then brought in our pest management, our new pest management team. I forget the words that we used for that. And it was determined that he wasn't complying with the contract. So it was the luck of the draw that that staff person happened to notice it, and how appreciative we are of that. So, you know, I think it needs to be, well, I respect the issue of the finance and the budget. It's just, I don't want to leave things to chance. And given that we are so dependent on these contractual contractor vendor relationships for a lot of our operational things, I just want to make sure someone's ensuring and checking that those contracts are fulfilled.
And I just want to make sure as well that we're not leaving the conversation as if there isn't a set of oversight. There is oversight.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah, but you know, Farid, thanks, and Brenda as well. The issue is internal audit is, you know, it's an independent one. The independence, you know, the internal oversight is fine, but ultimately the reporting structure, that, you know, if there is a collusion with 2 or 3 departments, you know, all those, you know, the scope, and that's why, you know, we're talking about the internal audit and independent internal audit, which directly reports to the board.
Yes.
Audit function, as far as not the as for the reporting structure, administratively, yes, reports to CEO or whatever. But
yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, thank you for that. If you don't have any further comments or questions, we'll move to item number 10. That's COVID-19 costs.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Through the chair. Thank you. So for number 10, this is for.
Sorry, Vince.
Yeah.
Lauren, my apologies, and through the chair. Would it be possible to ask the committee for a motion to accept item number 9 as information?
Yeah.
My apologies for I just as we move forward.
Okay. Okay. It didn't write the motion. Okay. So shall we have a motion to accept this consolidated budget for information purpose? Any more? Moved by Farid and seconded by Carrie. All in favor? Carried. Okay, so let's go to item.
My apologies for interrupting, Lawrence.
It's okay. I thought information probably we don't need a motion. That was my understanding. Okay, let's Vince, please go ahead.
Okay, so number 10 through the chair. This section here talks about the COVID-19 costs. I think we've gone through a bit as well. It talks about in terms of for information purposes there, and recommending that we receive the report. The report outlines essentially the recovery and the process that the city goes through on behalf of TSHC and TCHC to recover for the COVID-19 costs, and also in terms of the information that we provide on a budgetary basis there. And included in there as well, there's a couple of supplementary attachments in terms of the instructions of how the COVID recovery is costed. So if you do have some opportunity to go through it, that outlines essentially all of their processes from a recovery perspective, and also the potential shortfall from the city. And as outlined earlier, the overall budget pressure from COVID-19 was over $1 billion. So from TSHC perspective, $10 million is essentially
pretty
a drop
good
in the bucket.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty good.
Outside of that item there for the COVID recovery, I believe those are it. Are there any questions relating to the COVID report?
Just show me the money. I love how they pay you a year later, you know. Gee, I wish I could do that.
Okay, looks like we don't have any more questions or comments. Then shall we move to the item number 11, that's updates to two of our policies, accounts payable and delegation of authority. Again, Vince.
Yeah, thank you, Lawrence, and through the chair. So on their attachment, you'll see two approval. One of them is the accounts payable policy. Essentially, the accounts payable policy, the purpose of the accounts payable policy is to ensure that all authorized Toronto Seniors Housing Corporation expenditures are paid in a timely manner and recorded in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. The accounts payable policy is an important part of the day-to-day operation. It outlines the requirement based on the current service delivery agreement between TCC and TSHC and provides the appropriate mechanism to resolve issues and provide controls. Along with the accounts payable policy, there's also the updated to the delegations of authority policy, which was amended or changed since the last update in February of 2022. And just to go through the actual changes itself, the items that are highlighted in orange will be the slight adjustments that we have. Essentially, the main changes we had were essentially the title changes from the existing to the new. And also on top of it, there were some minor adjustments in terms of the thresholds from a petty cash write-off from $250 down to $100 to ensure tighter controls. Along with that as well, attachment 6 allows a little bit more stronger in terms of control from a releasing of cash and payments. So here there's a board involvement, anything over $500,000 to coincide with essentially the existing delegations of authority of control within attachment 1, 2, and 3 as well. So all that enhancement will make sort of the information a little bit more tighter in terms of cash and also the outlays of cash from an organization perspective, and also the signing of contracts as well. Are there any questions relating to the policies?
Brenda.
I think I'm okay. Is 500,000 the norm for what a CEO, director of finance, whatever the titles are? Is that within the range of what authority there is granted?
It's really depending on the size of the organizations and the limit. I mean, certainly for two signees to be 500,000, some organization that is very, very low. Typically, at other organizations I've been with, typically there's a limit up to about $1 million to $2 million for CEO and directors to sign off. But certainly,
okay.
by certainly having 500,000, it will coincide with some of the other delegations of authority level as well. So I think it fits in. Prior to that, there were no levels of authority on that basis there. So we mentioned that this makes it a little bit more tighter. And so certainly if there are anything over 500,000, we will need to include both Fareed or one of Fareed or Lawrence to be able to approve the transaction, which in this case here, we don't have a lot of that transaction. The only one that would have gone through, again, if there was an item, would be for the insurance piece that was happened in recently. But outside of that, it's the amount is it's much smaller, of course.
Yeah.
Carrie, do you have any question? Fareed. Vince, is it in line with the TCHC current delegation of authority?
Certainly we used a lot of the requirements there. I have to go back and check to see if it's in line with them. I know we were using the basis what we were proposing. I wasn't involved in the original delegations of authority, so I have to go back and check to see whether or not what TCHC's policy would be. But my guess would be it's probably different and probably lower than their level of authority.
Thank you. I think Vince, you can go ahead with you've finished your vote.
Yeah, so I think, do you want to raise the motion?
Do we need?
To the
Yeah.
chair?
Okay. So I need a motion for approval so that we can recommend this policy update to the board. Need a mover?
Mr. Chair.
Warren, and seconded by Fareed. All in favor? So it's carried. Next will be item number 12. That's the 2022 preliminary results.
Okay.
Vince.
Thank you. Through the chair. The financial result, the preliminary result, as you know, we're heading into year end. So we've been trying to get through the rest of the stuff through. The information is, again, preliminary at this point, and is for information purposes only. Through December 31st of 2022, TSHC incurred operating expenses of 25,683,175, and revenue amounted to 25,845,626, which in this case here has a surplus of 162,451, and that surplus is of course the interest income that we receive through the bank, as reported in the past there. And along with that, we realized the City of Toronto grant of $4.8 million, and through the revenue received from TCHC, we recognize about $20.8 million, and that is to ensure that we've accounted for all of the revenue and expenses relating to the operational component. And so overall, there's an extra surplus there of 162,451. There is a potential $857,000 of deferred revenue right now that are sitting in TCHC, which we will be discussing with TCHC in terms of the payment and the settlement of that. So potentially, if you look at the actual budget and on the income statement wise, it's about $1.262 million budgeted. So if you add in that $857,000, we're actually essentially very close to that. And if anything, we're probably only about 150 to 200,000 off from their original budget. And again, the main area there is really on the salaries and wages, where we had an actual expenditure wise of about $200,000 more than budget. And that was to include the ISM phase 3 expenses that was not included in the original budget of 2022. So outside of that, I think we're consistently there. We're working through right now. There are remaining items that we need to go through to finalize. One is the Mercer post-retirement obligation, which we'll need to true up. And then of course, the surplus that we mentioned earlier. And on top of that as well, we have the accounts review and reconciliation in payroll, and also any remaining year-end entries, if any. So I would expect that between now and the next 4 weeks before the auditors will arrive, there will be some other minor adjustment balance sheet entries to offset that, and I would anticipate that the amount will be pretty consistent with what we expect it to land at this point.
Brenda.
The ISM phase 3, I saw that reference. That extra cost is what, a staff cost? What is it? Is the intention is more staff under that line? What is ISM phase 3?
Yes, that's correct. There, to the chair, in 2022, was about $2.5 million of headcount that was transferred from the city to TCHC and also to TSHC. And I think that this amount here relating to the expenditure-wise that we had to take on additional headcount at TSHC seniors operations.
And the interest income we get and the rental income, does that come to us? We keep that, or does that get sent back to TCHC in our reconciliation?
So from the revenue piece of it, this is the discussions that we will have with TCHC according to the service delivery agreement, and also through the transition agreement. All surpluses will sweep through TCHC. So potentially both the interest component and also the revenue piece of it from TCHC will go back to them. So they will potentially be be seeing about over $1 million in terms of that surplus that will go back to TCHC.
And what's the explanation for that? Like, why do we not, as an entity, maintain that interest income from the bank and the rental income from commercial and other rents? I mean, why is it we don't keep it? What's the explanation for it to go back to TCHC? Can anyone answer that?
Yeah, I could, Brenda, I'll answer that question. So, when, working towards June 1st in that transition period, there's certainly, there was not certainty, and I don't think there's even necessarily certainty right now
That's
around
right.
the specificities around these revenues, and the focus at this point is to keep really both organizations whole as it relates to kind of revenues and expenses. And so there, the revenue, there is a more consistent revenue stream through our seniors buildings. And so, as part of the work in 2023 with further financial analysis for both Toronto Seniors and Toronto Community Housing, we think we need to further understand exactly, this revenue and expense ledger for both of the organizations. But to be honest, at this point, with mid-year and not as much kind of clarity around the expenses, it's keeping both organizations whole, and as the transition agreement said, the surplus goes back to TCHC.
We're happy with that?
Brenda, I think I'll just say that it is known that the seniors buildings, there is a more consistent revenue stream, more consistent payment. Yeah. And so therefore,
We're the cash cow. Yeah.
You don't want to, have a negative offset on TCHC, their family units. So it's still just really best understanding how those revenues and expenses reflect the two corporations.
Well, I raised that when we were trying to discuss this the service agreement between the two organizations, and I still raise it because I think it's something. I mean, we talk about keeping everyone whole, but I think there is an issue of, well, if we generate these revenues and interest and rental revenue, is there no argument to be made that we should perhaps keep some of it for any of our future planning and programming, particularly under the integrated service management?
Sure.
So I've raised it before. I will still raise it again, that I'm concerned that it all goes back to TCHC, and I know we're captives in many ways, but I just would like to question that argument, and I don't know if we'll have much truck or trade with the city, with Toronto's community housing, but I just think we need to look at all those assumptions, and there is some value in us being able to generate some independent income that we could use for other programming or innovative programming.
Agree.
Well, let's fight for it. To the staff and to the
negotiate.
Negotiate. Yeah, you gotta be tough. You gotta fight, man. I mean, I spent my life fighting funders, and they always said no. And guess what? They always gave me after the fight. So I know that's maybe my personal.
I think that has more to do with you, Brenda.
Maybe so, but I think it's a relevant thing. Where are we going to find the resources to do the innovative programming and servicing that we are talking about? And we're on the hook for answering that, right? So we can't have any control somewhat and some creative, control of some of those funds and how we use them. And then how are we going to do innovative and even bare basic support things for our seniors?
Okay, Kerry?
Only $1.
Thank you, Lawrence. Vince, are we still enthusiastic or positive about the HST recoverable dollars? Is that there are no kinks in that?
Yeah, so we recently received the report back through the chair, Lawrence, sorry about that, through the chair. We did receive the report back recently, and we feel confident that they have addressed the three main questions on that. And so right now the next step is we're waiting for the city to review that letter through legal, and they will definitely come back to us and let us know the outcome. Potentially, if everything goes well, I would anticipate that by either end of first quarter, beginning of second quarter, a decision will be made. And if there's a positive outcome that comes through, they could potentially go retroactively to June of 2021 since the date of incorporation. So definitely there's about 198 to $200,000 of amount that has been recovered. So that potentially would be a positive thing. But again, it's up to the CRA to assess. There are some questions in terms of the three main questions that they posed in the previous questions. So we were trying to address those questions, and certainly we are probably out of situations where we feel confident that this letter will provide a further outcome in terms of how the decision will be made. And I think that if I had to look it through it, I would say there's a good chance that they would approve of the application.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Actually, next item we'll be talking about it. Anyway, Warren, do you have any questions on 2022 preliminary financial?
No, I'm good, Mr. Chair.
Fareed, your hand is up.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. At the risk of mentioning the obvious, I mean, I would note that we've got about 5.6 million in liability, both in terms of post-retirement benefit, but as well as vacation time in lieu. So I think what we just need to do is that we need to make sure that we're not adding to it. I know this is something this is a legacy piece that we inherited from TCHC, and it's not surprising. I think most public sector organizations have some kind of liability associated with this line item. I would just sort of want to watch it to make sure that we're not adding to that liability, either through vacation time in lieu or indeed vacation time, or the post-retirement benefit.
Reed, isn't that one-time payments though? For those?
It is one time, whether it's one time or multiple time. I mean, it's money that we owe.
Yeah, I thought I understood it to be one time, like it was to cover for the past commitments.
It is, but
Yeah.
all I'm saying, Brenda, through the chair, is that that amount can also build up if we continue to defer vacation or we defer payment in lieu. We could be adding to that liability.
Vince, your hand is up.
Yeah, so thank you through the chair. So that's a good point there, Fareed. So certainly the $5.6 million, that's the amount that we're waiting to receive back from TCHC. I have a number of discussions with the corporate division at TCHC that we will be getting the $1.2 million for the vacation and the leave time. The post-retirement is the piece that is still going to be pending and up in the air. Just because the fact that these are some of the legacy stuff that both TCHC is waiting for the city to give them money, so then in turn they will give us money. But it will be, I would suggest that we will look at how we can classify that, but it will most likely be classified in terms of long-term receivable. And also if you note it in the liability side of things, we've included as a long-term liability, which in this case here is about $4.4 million. And then the rest of it is in the accounts payable, which we have started to use up on the vacation piece of it. So we will definitely be going back to TCHC to see if we can recover that $1.2 million sooner rather than later. And so those are the pending discussions that we will have between now and the next 4 weeks to hopefully resolve to get that cash in. Potentially, they could also say, well, you have a surplus there, and then, take it from that surplus. So again, we will wait and see how that conversations will go, but we will need to settle that piece there in order for us to finalize that area there.
Vince, I have a question on, I'm basically trying to understand this grant from the city.
Yes.
That grants that which you receive from the city, what expense, we are paying out of that grant?
Correct. So in 2022, we received 2 tranches of the grants. One was in, I believe it was in the beginning of 2022, $2.8 million. And then the second component of it was in June of 2022. That was about $4.8 million. Total for the year that we received was about $7.3 million. Along with that as well, there was about 300,000 that carry over from 2021.
Yeah.
So that makes up that component there. We only recognize in this case here about $4.8 million in 2022 financial. So potentially there's still another $3 million. And we've spoken to the city in terms of what we're doing with this funds there. Technically, we have to use this fund up by the end of this year, of December 31st, 2023. So I would anticipate that at the pace that we're going, we'll probably use up all the funds, probably be by around July, August of this year. And the city has confirmed that as long as that grant has been used up, there's no sort of repayment process to be done. And so definitely we will be on the lookout for that, and we'll continue to make sure that that grant has been fully utilized by the end of the year.
Yeah. So which expenses are paid out of this? What costs or expenses?
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, so those are all corporate costs related only. So anything to do with staffing costs, anything to do with on the corporate piece of it, we keep essentially 2 sets of of expenses, if you want to, not expenses, but you essentially will have the operational piece, and then we also have the corporate piece. Anything to do with the corporate piece, that's taken out of that grant. And anything cost relating to the operation, that's part of the TCHC funding that we receive on a monthly basis, and that goes through that P&L there.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, I was just computing that your deferred grant revenue, the balance sheet you're talking about.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
3.095. I did my computation based on the 342,834 we had balance brought forward. I get a different number, 2.827 million. So probably you can send me those details, how that number we arrived at. There is a difference of around 267,000. It could be anything, I'm not sure. Essentially, what is happening is right now, whatever that cash at bank we have, it's half of that is this grant which we received and we have not utilized it, right?
Essentially, yes. Right.
Yeah, and my question you answered already. So what to do with that balance? Should we return to the city, or will we be using it up? Okay.
Well, we're trying to use it up, aren't we?
Yes, we will use that up, and we should be able to use that up, I would say, by July, August of this year. Typically, our corporate expenditure wise is about $5.7 million. So we should be able to use that pretty much by that period of time. And so I don't have any concern that will not be used up.
Okay, thank you for that. And I have a couple of suggestions for. We have got this statement of operations, right? So for the next board meeting onwards, if you can add a variance column, that would be helpful.
Yes.
And then I got one more. The insurance expenses, if you can segregate and show it separately instead of clubbing with the professional services.
Yes.
That too for when this information goes to the board next time, and then going forward, if you can do that, that would be helpful. That's all I have got. Thank you for that. And will this information, the same information, will be going to the board next month, or there will be changes in this information?
Well, in the next board meeting, through the chair, there will be, by the next meeting, I would anticipate that there might be adjustments and changes. The next board meeting is going to be on February 23rd, I believe. So by that time, we should have the final number. The audit will happen on the week of February 21st, that same week. So I would say that by that time, we would have pretty much a more accurate view in terms of what that final number will look like. And then for the next AFRC meeting, that will be for approval of the audit report and also for the 2022 results.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So we don't need a motion to accept this for information because numbers that will go to board will be different, right? Grant, do we need a motion or?
If we could have a motion to accept it for information at this committee, that way we can track the decision at this table today, but it will be something that the motion doesn't specifically talk about going to board. So I think if we could accept it at this committee through a motion, it would close that item on today's agenda.
Okay, thank you. So I need a motion to accept this financial information for the. I need a mover. Moved by Farid and seconded by
Warren.
Lauren. Yeah, all in favor? Carried. Okay, so we'll move to the last item. That's item number 13. Other financial updates, including HST application and other stuff. Vince.
Thank you, through the chair. So there are 4 items on the other financial update. One of them was just mentioned earlier about the HST application process. So as outlined there are 3 areas there that they're looking to get. So we're waiting for the city's legal team to come back and provide us with an update in terms of if they accept that letter. Once that letter has been accepted, then we will send on behalf of the consultant at McKinney Cooper for them to submit the questions from the CRA, and then they will evaluate the application status there. Next item on the agenda is the letter of guarantee, City of Toronto. So we did submit it to the city recently to provide us with a letter of guarantee. Again, this is through our bank, which is which we are requesting a line of credit, and as part of the line of credit, they would like to get the letter of guarantee from the city, and we've sent the information to their planning team, and they're waiting right now for approval. Once we get that information back from the city representative, then we can proceed with going through the process of getting the line of credit through RBC. I believe last time that letter of guarantee went through, they had to go through council for approval.
That's right, yeah.
So in this case, sir, it might take a little bit longer process possibly, and I would even anticipate that it will probably not be cleared until probably either in first quarter or even later the second quarter. So we will definitely wait for the response from the city and also try to get an estimate in terms of when we can anticipate to get that approval as well. Again, the letter of guarantee, it just basically provides us with a $2.5 million line of credit in the event that something happens. We can use that fund there to compensate for payroll related. Right now, there's about close to $5.9 million of cash in the bank, which is okay. I mean, that would basically be able to run 1 month worth of transactions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So certainly, the more cash that we have in place, then the more I would call it the more assurance that there won't be any concern there. But I think we'd be in very close conversations with TCHC, and so certainly if there are situations where we might be in a short position, we can certainly request for that, and then they have provided assurance that that won't be the case here until we get the line of credit in place.
I thought we had a line of credit. I thought Michael Scherer had applied for it. Lawrence, do you remember that?
We have been talking about it for more than a year now. Even Norm Rees had tried doing that. Yeah, but we haven't got the best of understanding.
Okay.
Any other questions? Warren?
Nope, fine.
Carrie?
No, thank you, Lawrence.
Reed? And no. What about, I think we had talked, Vince, have you completed your
No, there's a couple of more items in there. I can maybe just quickly touch base with that. So on the vacation leave time and post-retirement liability, I know that we discussed briefly about that. So we've now transferred the amount over in terms of the liability, but also we've booked the $4.4 million of receivable at this point. So we're waiting for that discussion. And so we're going to wait for also the $1.2 million vacation as well. I think the only other ones that I would like to sort of bring up would be the financial analysis review, which is, this was an item that was raised, a motion was raised in the TCHC on December 22nd board meeting to seek a one-time financial support from the city in order to undertake a detailed financial analysis of the efficiencies and effectiveness to be achieved in respect to services delivered by TCHC and TSHC. The full scope of the financial analysis is to be scoped and established by the middle of February. A third party is expected to do the work on behalf of the city and respond back to the city. So that's the information that we have right now, and that's what we wanted to sort of share with the committee. And then finally, the Q4 TCHC reconciliation. We're still working through that at this point, and we're expecting to get the result back probably in the coming weeks. So certainly it will be included probably in the next board, either the board meeting or in the AFRC in March would be the final. That would be what we would anticipate to be at this point.
Thank you. Any questions, Brenda?
The financial analysis review. What does this mean, to undertake analysis of efficiency and effectiveness? Are we looking at financial effectiveness? Are we looking at program effect? Like, what is it? It's a line, but I don't know what's going to actually happen. What is it?
Vince, yeah, please go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
Or is it Tom? Sorry, Tom.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. I'm talking away here on mute. Sorry.
Go ahead, Tom.
It's through to the chair to Brenda. So to the earlier point, this speaks to this financial analysis speaks to the overall, the revenue, the expenses across both of the corporations. And I'll use for an example, again, the service delivery agreement, for many of the costs, we've come down at 23.5%, right? Is we're paying as a reflection of the building. What this financial analysis will do, we'll take a closer look at that and say, all right, in this category is in this expense is 23.5 what it should be, or should it be 18%, or should it be 27%? So there will be a further, I think, definition and refinement around the expenses across the organizations. And right now in the service delivery agreement, there's a $5 million kind of admin fee that we are paying for TSHC. So the analysis will say, is that year over year, is that a reasonable thing to incorporate? And the other important part around this financial analysis is it will enable us to be more definitive around the agreement, our agreement in the future. So if that's a lease agreement, whatever our future agreements are between the two corporations, this financial analysis will really allow us to have a more definitive agreement across both of the corporations. So the way I think that with this envisioned right now, and Fareed and I did have the chance to talk to Paul Johnson, is this whole piece around transition, service delivery agreement, lease agreement. I think it's really important that we go through this exercise and kind of diligence around this financial analysis, and then that will help us to really inform a better agreement between the two organizations.
It was initiated by TCHC at their board meeting, so I assume they had identified some issues that they wanted to examine.
Through the chair. So I think it's just, it was, I had been, told with Paul and with Jag, their CEO, that this financial analysis would be undertaken. I think it was their kind of decision to have that approved, by their board to undertake it. And it does, I think, that I think this relates to the incredible, financial pressures that TCHC is under, and the deficit, right, that both organizations, we ended up with 2022, and so there is this imperative, and I think it's from the TCHC side around the deficit, this imperative that we look at. It not, we can't go into 2024 with the same level of deficit, right? Repeat. So this is, I think it was really from their perspective, the finance is more of an imperative and taking to their board for approval. So, but we understood too that this financial analysis would be necessary.
This might be a good place to look at our interest income and our rental and commercial income.
There's yeah.
Well,
Everything's on the table.
well, I've always felt very strongly about this. It's no secret. I don't think the lack of clarity sometimes on these things, and I don't know, we're so new, we maybe didn't know what things we should be advocating for. But I just think if we're going to review some things, which is perfectly legitimate. I mean, I think there's some good issues here. And our deficit is primarily, is it not, from the COVID thing, and then the misjudging of some of the expenditures? I mean, it's not as if we're spending money right, left, and center, right?
Yeah. Through the chair to Brenda, that deficit, if you just recall from the budget, the consolidated budget, utilities was a significant
big one
factor. Yeah. And then escalating costs as it relates to contractors and their work, and so those are, so it wasn't, that was the focus, but this also speaks to this financial analysis, though it does help to, as I said, will define further the revenues and expenses associated with both of the corporations.
I always get anxious when I hear the word efficiency and effectiveness. That means cutbacks in my limited little brain, because that's the language of Margaret Thatcher.
And this analysis, this report will be shared with us as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
sure.
But they'll be reporting to TCHC. They're the
through the chair. It is to both. It is to both.
Okay.
Yeah, it's to both. The financial analysis is committed to both organizations.
And it's an outside person. That means yet again another consultant, right?
at the city's nickel.
Is there no staff people who can do these things?
No,
through the chair, I think this one is important, that it's an objective third. I think it's really important that
I
it's
understand.
external.
I understand.
Okay, Warren?
And so the process presumably will be that the report will be brought to our committee in draft. We will review it, question it, blah, blah, blah. And then when we're satisfied, we will recommend the report's acceptance to the board.
To the chair, to Warren, that's a good question, and I can get confirmation of exactly how that will move through.
Yeah, I would be happy with that process. If it's different, though, I'd appreciate knowing what's being planned.
Yeah, no, I'll check. I'll confirm that.
Okay.
Accountability and transparency.
Any other questions? Read. Okay. If we no more questions, we have completed all the items on the agenda. A few minutes left. Any other items?
Not for me.
No. Okay.
Through the chair, Lawrence, could we just have a motion to receive that report as well, if that's okay?
Yeah, fine. So I need a motion to that effect. I need a more.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Moved by Warren and seconded by Fareed. All in favor? Carried. So in that case, it's time for us for adjournment. I need a motion again for adjournment. Moved by Fareed and seconded by
Warren.
All in favor? Carried. Yes. Thank you, all of you, for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Everybody.
Good to see everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks, staff. Thanks to the staff.
Yes.